Hello, welcome back to Through the Trapdoor. I'm Emily.
And I'm Katie.
And this is our podcast where we read you Harry Potter fan fiction.
And we're also going to go back to something we've tried before. We still have both dogs in the room with us.
Yes, but we got a new microphone stand so they can't knock it over anymore.
Woohoo! We're so fancy.
We got one that was mounted to the wall because I was tired of the other one.
Constantly having to move it around and...
Yeah, getting knocked over all the time.
Needing to use pliers to adjust it.
Yeah, no pliers needed for this one.
So exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the most exciting thing is our new microphone stand.
I'm super excited. Sorry, I was just staring at it.
We both were, so it's fine.
Amanda emailed us again.
Hi!
We're so excited.
We literally love you.
You're our favorite person, Amanda.
You really are.
And in her email, she asks if we could be friends. Yes, of course we can be friends.
You listen to our podcast. You are officially our friend.
Yes.
Only our friends have listened to this.
Basically, yeah.
So if you're listening to this, hi friends.
I know that there's more people out there that listen to the podcast, but we feel like it's only ever been our friends and family, so you're all officially our friends.
All of you.
Yes.
I hope everybody had a wonderful new year.
Yeah. All right. Who's ready for the rest of this chapter? You, Sirius Black, are going to tell me what is going on, Melody declared, crossing her arms and looking at him menacingly. She had him cornered. They were in a corridor somewhere in one of the furthest wings of the school. Sirius was backed up against a wall and looking rather nervous, and actually starting to sweat under Melody's withering glare. She was several inches shorter than him and had to look up to glare at him, especially when they were standing close together, like right now. It wasn't that Melody was short. Sirius was just tall. Melody was actually tall by girl standards, but Sirius was over 6 feet and had a heck of an advantage. I don't know what you're talking about, Sirius lied, only half convincingly. You know perfectly well what I am talking about. You and the Marauders have been sneaking around without me, Melody accused, getting, if possible, closer and poking her finger into Sirius's chest. She stood on tiptoe to get closer to eye level with him, and you, she informed him, are going to tell me exactly what has been going on. Nothing has been going on, Sirius began, but with another menacing glare from Melody, he stopped and sighed. Okay, fine, something has been going on, but I'm not allowed to tell you what it is, and under no circumstances would I break the Marauder's code of honor. He slapped his hand to his chest rather dramatically, nearly jamming Melody's finger. Ow! Melody yanked her finger away. Thanks a lot, Sirius, she said, massaging her finger and glaring at him. Sirius shrugged. Sorry, it's a rule. But Peter, that scab-faced little warthead, is in on it, isn't he? Sirius shrugged helplessly. Melody stomped her foot, which was very dangerous, as she was still standing rather uncomfortably close to Sirius, and her foot nearly landed on his. This isn't fair. Don't you people trust me? Sirius covered her mouth with his hand. Melody licked it, and his hand went away. Ew, Melody, that's disgusting.
That's the only proper response to when someone covers your mouth with their hand is to lick their hand.
I was going to say, I don't think my mouth has ever been covered by someone else's hand, and I did not lick it.
Immediately. I don't care who you are. I'm gonna lick your hand.
Well, then don't put your hand over my mouth. I won't, believe me. As soon as Sirius had gotten over it, Melody grabbed the front of his robes and yanked his face down to hers. Sirius, just tell me what is going on. I can't stand it anymore. Sirius winced. You don't have to be so violent. He detached Melody's hand from his robes. Melody sighed, looking deflated. Uh-oh. Here came the part that Sirius hated the most. Whenever he fought a girl, She would wear herself down enough that she deflated into nothing, and then Sirius would lose the fight. Fine, she said, regaining her rather murderous attitude. Then I'll just come back and squeeze it out of you later. Sirius smiled. Melody really wasn't like other girls. What are you smiling about? Melody demanded, narrowing her eyes. You don't always have to be so tough, you know, Sirius told her, putting a hand on her waist. Melody blinked. Well, sure I do, she said, trying to sound like her normal violent self, but it came out a little high-pitched. Sirius smiled. Melody's heart skipped a beat and started pounding faster. If I wasn't tough, then I'd have guys hitting on me all the time, and I'd have to kick their asses. She slipped her arms around his neck. It saves me a lot of time this way. Sirius kissed her once very softly on the lips. Melody closed her eyes and considered for a moment, then very hesitantly kissed him back.
Oh.
Finally, they're kissing.
I know, finally.
James was very, very confused. He was sitting on the lawn next to the lake while Peter tickled the giant squid, trying to explain things to Remus. She was talking about how I smelled, James said, shaking his head. It seemed really weird. It seems really weird now, but at the time it was, I don't know, sweet or something. So then what? Remus asked, watching Peter run away from a very agitated giant squid who was tired of having its tentacles played with. Then she talked about getting married. I can't figure her out. She's insane, Moody. Insane. Remus smiled at the nickname. I don't know what to tell you, Prongs. You're probably right, though. I am? Yeah, she's insane. Lily was crying, rather irrationally. Mimi, I don't know what to do. Mimi was trying to comfort her, but it wasn't really working. Oh, come on. Lily, it couldn't have been that bad, she soothed. Just let things cool down for a couple days. It will be okay. But it's not that. We didn't have a fight or anything. She broke down and started crying again. Oh, Lily. Mimi hugged her and grabbed a tissue, which Lily gratefully accepted and blew her nose with. Now calm down and tell me what happened. Lily nodded and told her about it the best that she could, and then she started crying again. I made a complete fool out of myself. Her cheeks flushed, just thinking about it. He'll never be able to look at me again without thinking about how much of a complete idiot I am. Oh, come on, Lily, it's not that bad as all that. Just avoid him for now, and things will get better, I promise you. Mimi smiled at her hopefully. Lily nodded, although she didn't look like she quite believed it herself. With classes in session again, things started to move very fast for 6 years. They didn't have any extra exams to study for, expecting those at the end of the year because owls were out of the way and newts weren't until next year. But the teachers seemed to enjoy pushing them anyway. You need to learn absolutely as much as you can this year, McGonagall announced in one class period. The things you learn this year will be absolutely crucial, as next year some of you may miss proper lessons. Everyone knew what she was talking about, of course. 7th years who were interested in Auror positions had chances to take a 3-month Auror internship or training session for 3 months during 7th year, which began late January and ended in early May. You had to be a prefect at least to qualify for the spot. Head boy and girl always almost went, even if they weren't serious about becoming Aurors. Lily herself was planning to go, unless, of course, James was. In that case, she'd stay at school because she's sure she'd never get over her humiliation. That is, until October 2nd.
What happens on October 2nd, or happened on October 2nd?
I bet we're going to find out.
I hope we do.
Lily and James had barely spoken a word to each other for nearly a month, so when she got his owl, she was rather surprised. Meet me by the lake at 8 o'clock, James. Well, that's not very specific, is it? Lily murmured, but she folded up the note and went out to the lake at 8 o'clock just the same. He wasn't very hard to find. He was standing there all alone with his back turned to her. She walked up behind him quietly, and he turned before she got a chance to say anything. She smiled just at the sight of him. She felt like she hadn't seen him for centuries, and it felt good just to be near him again.
'Cause you love him, you crazy person.
They're so dramatic.
Yeah, well, I was pretty dramatic at 16, so fair.
Same. He handed her a single flower, a rose in full bloom. It was exquisite. The petals were blue and the stem was silver. No doubt a simple coloring charm. But it didn't matter to her. "It's beautiful," she said softly, holding it delicately in her hand, minding the thorns. "It won't last very long," James said, almost apologetically. "It's just a regular rose, and the thorns," he seemed to rush to apologize for it. But Lily took his hand, and he stopped. "It's beautiful," she repeated, and looked into his eyes, smiling softly. "If that was even a way that you could describe a smile." He kissed her, then spoke. "Whatever that was at the beginning of the year," he began, and Lily's face burned. She looked down at the ground. "Let's just forget it ever happened," he said. Lily looked back up at him, her face cooling down. "Deal," she said, and threw her arms around his neck and kissed him.
Apparently they've moved past slapping.
Yes, now they've moved on to just kissing.
Well, steps in the right direction.
Yes. Progress. "Melody, for the last time, you do not need to go know what is going on with the Marauders." "But I do, and you promised you'd ask James, remember, Lil?" "Lil, since when do you call me Lil?" Melody slammed her hand onto the table. "Since right now, please, Lily, come on. Sirius wouldn't tell me, but James likes you a lot more than Sirius likes me." At this, Lily snorted and rolled her eyes. "What?" Lily demanded. "Please," Lily said. "You act as if you two aren't head over heels in love with each other." "Yeah, well, you and James act as if you don't spend all of potions class staring at each other with googly eyes." Lily's mouth fell open. "We do not," she sputtered, spots of color appearing on her cheeks. Melody smiled. "Oh, you don't think so? Honestly, I think Professor Thorne is ready to hang himself." "Oh, shut it." "Not until you ask him. I'm not going to." "Ladies," a shrill voice interrupted their not-so-quiet argument, and with a start they realized they were both in the library and that a great many people were staring at them.
I love it. I love loud arguments in public. They're my favorite.
They're always so awkward, but I can't tear my eyes away from them ever.
Oh, never. Loud arguments in public are literally one of my favorite things to people watch.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That and one of my biggest pet peeves is people who talk on speakerphone in public. So when I'm walking by people doing that, I will respond to questions that the person on the phone asks or things that they say. I walked by one and went, "Oh my God, no way." And the person looked horrified. And I'm like, sorry, this wasn't a conversation for everybody as a whole.
Oh, I thought you wanted everybody to be involved, and that's why you were talking on speakerphone.
Oh, it's the best.
Seriously, buy yourself headphones. Don't be that person.
Please. Or people who FaceTime in public, don't be that person.
I get it if you're, trying to, buy something for someone else.
Right. If you're shopping, fine. I'm a retail manager. I get it. Sometimes you need to ask your son if he likes the color of a shirt before you buy it for him. Fair.
But don't just wander around the store FaceTiming people. That's a little weird.
Please. Please stop. Just stop. It's no point.
It's weird.
Not necessary.
Please stop.
There's our passionate rant for the day.
Don't use speakerphone. That was inappropriate. "Sorry, Madam Pence," Lily stammered. "Sorry indeed. Now would you kindly get out of my library and not come back for a week, or I will be forced to take extravagant amounts of points from both of your houses." That is rude. It's the library.
That's excessive. You could be like, shut up and sit down or leave.
Yeah, but not a whole week.
That's rude. It's where people study.
But Madam, Lily began, trying to explain that she needed a particular book to study from, but Madam Pince wouldn't have it. No buts, young lady, now get out! Lily quickly gathered up her things and left, cheeks flushed, followed by a rather unaffected Melody. At the entrance of the library, the girls saw James and Sirius, both of them looking rather amused. And Lily glared at James and kicked his shins on the way out.
Oh, rude.
Rude.
I thought the abuse had stopped.
Clearly not. Ow, James said, and then had to follow her to taunt her, and she had to keep kicking his shins.
Well, the first one was uncalled for. But if you're going to taunt me, I'm going to kick you in the shins again.
Yes, but the first one was uncalled for. Spotted raincoats, Sirius exclaimed suddenly, in the middle of all this shin-kicking and owing, and the other three had to turn and look at him quite strangely to make sure he was really all in there. What? Sirius asked, eyeing them all strangely. You're looking at me as though I were a three-eyed, pigeon-toed, hairless poodle with a blue, hairy tongue. That was a weird thing to describe, Sirius.
It really, really was.
Well, that's a disturbing mental picture, Melody said, looking quite scared.
Agreed.
For some reason, I keep imagining it with my baby cousin's head on it. Your baby cousin is a hairless poodle? James asked in disgust. You're not talking about Steve, are you? Lily asked, as she had seen a picture and heard lengthy descriptions of all of Melody's relatives. No, I'm thinking of John. What is this conversation?
I don't know, but I'm kind of here for it. Spotted raincoats. I'm gonna use that as an exclamation from now on.
Spotted raincoat. So weird.
Oh my god.
If a peacock laid a rooster's egg and you put a rat on top of it, what kind of animal do you think would come out? Sirius wondered, staring at the ceiling. Roosters can't lay eggs, James exclaimed. How daft can you be? Sirius, they didn't put some special mushrooms in the scrambled eggs this morning, did they? Lily asked rather nervously. No, but there's this fantastic boysenberry jam. They make boysenberry jam? Lily asked. Are you sure it wasn't blackberry? James asked. I love blackberry jam. Aren't boysenberries poisonous? Melody asked. No, that's mulberries, Lily corrected her, rolling her eyes. Neither of them are poisonous, nitwits, James informed them. We're not nitwits, snapped Lily, and she kicked him in the shins again. Ow! Maybe both of them are poisonous, Melody wondered, all three of them ignoring Sirius, who was now going on about dancing walruses.
Sirius is high as fuck.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting.
Like, he's real high.
What is happening?
You know what I'm picturing? I'm picturing nonsenseness coming out of him, but the way Rupert acted out Ron being drugged by the love potion.
Yes.
You know, just like, la, la, la,
Yep,
la.
exactly.
Okay, beautiful. I'm so happy that you understand the visual that I'm trying to explain there.
Suddenly, someone came tumbling out of a hidden passageway and rammed right into Lily and James, who ended up tangled on the floor. All three of them started struggling, which only caused them to get more tangled up in each other. And Sirius helped the third person detangle himself. It was, of course, Remus. Sirius, Remus, Melody stood watching James and Lily, who didn't seem to notice that there was no more third person, and that they could now easily untangle themselves. Instead, they were arguing and hurting each other, both intentionally and unintentionally. Ow, you kicked my shin again. Oh, I did not. Oh, you just poked me in the eye. Sorry. You are not. Sure, I am. Get your hand off my... It's off. Before she could kick him again. Are we untangled yet? Well, apparently not, and no one else is being much help. Wasn't there another person somewhere just a moment ago? They both looked up to see Sirius, Remus, and Melody laughing at them. and untangled themselves as quickly as possible, their faces red. Lily glared at James. That was all your fault. James's mouth opened. It was not, he insisted. It was his fault, he said, pointing at Remus, who smiled cheekily. Oh, come on, Prongs. You can't blame me for all of that. Aha, Melody said, jumping and pointing a finger accusingly at Remus. That's it. It's those nicknames again. What is with those stupid nicknames? All the Marauders shrugged. Nothing, they lied. Melody narrowed her eyes at them. Then she spun around to look at Lily. You, she said, just as accusingly. Me, Lily shot back. You promised you would. Remembering what she had promised, Lily covered Melody's mouth with her hand, spots of color appearing on her cheek. Yeah, later. Oh, Lily, I wouldn't do that if I were you, Sirius advised her. Ew, Lily said, removing her hand from Melody's mouth, discovering what Sirius had been talking about. She wiped her hand on her robes, and Melody shrugged. Hey, it works.
It does. It does work. I've
Yes.
never not licked someone's hand and they'll go, oh! I'm like, well, why'd you do that?
Except Ben, because he's now expecting it when he does it.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like Nick would expect it at this point, too.
Yeah. The
They're
first
like-
time they're like, oh!
Yeah, but now it's like, stop licking my hand. Don't put your hand near my face.
Exactly.
It will be licked.
Or bitten.
Yeah.
Don't put your fingers too close to my mouth. I will bite you.
They heard footsteps pounding down the hallway and turned to look at the same time. It was Mimi. Did you really get kicked out of the library for a week? She asked Lily, her eyes shining in excitement over the new gossip. Lily rolled her eyes. Yes, she said. And it's all, darling, she poked Melody. Here's fault. It is not, Melody protested. Besides, you should be grateful. I'd love to have an excuse not to go to the library again for a week. You do, you pinhead. You got kicked out too, Lily reminded her, rolling her eyes. And this is bad. This means you can't do your homework. Melody's eyes lit up in protest. Yay, she shouted, throwing her hands up in the air, and started jumping around the corridor, forgetting that they were all only a few yards from the library and that Madam Pince could hear her perfectly well from inside it.
But you're outside of the library.
They are outside of the library.
So, I don't think she can yell at you for that.
Sure enough, a few moments later, Madam Pince stuck her head out of the library doors and glared at the group down the hallway. 10 points from Ravenclaw and Gryffindor. Now get out of this corridor or there will be more. She ducked back inside the library and closed the doors with a decisive bang. Because the bang isn't more disruptive than
People talking in the corridor outside of the library.
Yeah. The group of teenagers looked at each other and shrugged, then carried on down the corridor in their usual fashion. After a few minutes, they seemed somehow to line themselves up in pairs, making a rather interesting procession going up and down the stairs, going absolutely nowhere before ending up back in the library corridor, but nobody was really paying attention, so they just kept going again. Sirius was in front, which was probably the reason for them going around in circles, and he was talking to Melody, who was still demanding to know the Marauder's secret. Lily and James were next, squabbling as usual over absolutely nothing, but they both looked very happy to be doing so for some odd reason. Mimi and Remus brought up the rear, and they were chatting quite happily about anything they could think of. They appeared to be the only two people not fighting, but for some reason they didn't look any happier than the two couples preceding them, just calmer. After a while, that is, after they had all talked and argued to their heart's content, and none of them had gotten what they really wanted, they all returned to their respective common rooms and did a great amount of nothing.
Sounds lovely. Just wandering around, chatting with your friends, and then just going home to
Yeah.
do nothing.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great day to me.
It really does. Melody couldn't sleep. She was in the girls' dormitory looking out the window, undoubtedly the only person still awake at this hour of the night. Or maybe it was morning. Whether midnight had passed or not, Melody really wasn't sure. The full moon was lovely at any rate, and for the past hour or so she sat staring at it, trying desperately to figure out what was going on, what she had missed. She wasn't so sure why she'd thought this was something she could figure out on her own, or even really what she was trying to figure out. But she felt as though someone had stuck a book right in front of her face, its pages blank, but only to her. And it was a book everyone else could read, or at least the Marauders could. But she couldn't, and she felt maybe if she just had to tickle it in the right place or poke its spine for the words to appear, but no matter what she did, the pages were still blank. So was her mind. Remus was sick again, she had noted. He seemed to get sick a lot, about once a month, in fact. It was odd. It almost seemed like he got sick on a regular basis. And then when he did get sick, he refused to tell anybody what he had been sick with. And besides that, an awful lot of Remus's relatives seemed to die during the year, a lot more than most people would ever get a chance to meet. And Remus had to be yanked out of school for every single one of their funerals, which all somehow lasted days at a time. Either his parents both had a phenomenal amount of aunts and uncles, or there was something fishy going on here. And it seemed to Melody that Remus's strange illness and funerals had to tie in with the Marauder's secret somehow. She didn't know how they did, but she knew they had to. Of course, she realized that she could just be completely daft and overreacting, but both things were just so strange she couldn't help feeling that one had something to do with the other.
Of course they all freaking are the same.
He is a werewolf.
Yeah. As soon as the full moon, I'm like, Remus!
Remus is sick again.
Remus is a little wolfie. His furry little problem.
Yep.
We have two furry little problems.
Specifically, we have one who barks a lot at nothing.
Seriously, nothing. Like, you could sneeze too loud and
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
he'd bark.
And, he barks, with enough pause in between that you're like, oh, he's done barking. And then he just keeps barking.
That's when I was like, oh, nope. Nope.
She sighed and averted her gaze from the moon to the grounds, which were bathed in an eerie silver light, and looked perfectly still. There was no wind tonight, which for some reason made the outdoors look less welcoming, not more. Suddenly, she saw a large, lumpy shadow out of the corner of her eye and shifted so that she could see it more clearly. At first, she couldn't tell if it was many people or just one large, disfigured person, but then she saw that it wasn't a person at all. It was some horrible animal, a huge beast. But as it drew nearer to her window, she saw, in fact, that it was 3 animals. A magnificent stag, a large, rather ferocious-looking dog, and there, somewhere in the middle, God, was that a werewolf? Melody's eyes grew wide, and she shrank away from the window, somehow feeling that if the creature took care to look up and see her, and somehow get into the castle and attack her. A million thoughts were racing through her head, all jumbled together, so that they didn't begin to make sense. But then one thought finally jumped away from all the others and made itself clear and present in her mind. Go get the Marauders.
Too bad that is the Marauders.
They're the ones you're looking at. She wasn't sure why this thought felt so comforting or why she felt the urge to listen to the thought, but it seemed like the best, most logical thing to do for no reason at all. The Marauders all took care of magical creatures, yes, but that really didn't give her the right to go barging into the boys' dormitory at who knows when in the morning, or possibly it was night. Wake them all up just to see some creature that might not be there when they finally all got to the window. Still, she threw on a blue bathrobe and hurried down the steps of the girls' dormitory. Then took 2 steps at a time up the boys'. She opened the door as quietly as she could, and to her relief, when she crept in, she could hear the sound of snoring. quite an awful lot of snoring, too. Oh, and loud. Good gracious, how could they sleep with all that noise? Well, she supposed if they were all drowning each other out, or something. She had absolutely no idea which beds belonged to the Marauders, so she just started poking through all of them. The first 3 beds were occupied, but not by the Marauders, and the last 4 were empty. The Marauders' beds were all completely empty. Melody was waiting in the common room when the Marauders all finally tumbled out of bed the next morning. They were quite late, too, as it was Saturday and they didn't have any classes to go to. "You!" she said, jumping up as soon as she saw them, pointing a finger at all of them accusingly. "What?" Sirius asked, rubbing his eyes and yawning. He was still in his pajamas, too, and Melody couldn't help but notice he looked rather cute. But darn her for noticing that now. This was not important right now. "All of you, I need to talk to you." James growled and rolled his eyes. "Come on, Melody. We all know what you're going to ask us, and we're not going to tell you, just... No, that's not it," Melody interrupted, fixing on all of them, except Peter, whom she was ignoring. With piercing stares, "I saw you," she hissed, with as much meaning in her voice as she could, and the Marauders' eyes all widened, and they knew exactly what she had seen. "Well, that's it then," James said, sighing, rather defeated. "You figured us out." The end.
The end.
We say the end, but there's still going to be many, 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 many more chapters.
So many more. So many more episodes.
Yeah.
That's it for this week.
We're going to try to pre-record a whole bunch of them, so if there's no new announcements, that's why, because we have to travel to Pennsylvania for my baby shower.
I know, I'm very excited.
Me too.
So we're going to try to get at least one other episode recorded, but it's still pretty early, so as long as we get food in my system, I think we could record 2.
Yeah.
And then get, basically January recorded.
Which will be exciting.
Great. So that's what we're going to try to do.
All right, let's go do that.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us on our journey through the trap door.
Please leave us a review on Facebook or iTunes. It would literally mean the world to us.
It really would.
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Through the Trapdoor 16 or on Twitter at The Trapdoor.
And please send us an email at throughthetrapdoor16@gmail.com with any story suggestions. And as always, join us again next Saturday as we travel through the trapdoor.